Hello there. This is Paul Glumaz. Today is the 6th of September, 2020. And this is being brought to you by General Welfare Presents. And what I want to go through is the issue of what I call the Biden option. You know, a lot of people are getting too wrapped up in, Donald Trump is this and Donald Trump is that, and, is Donald Trump his worst enemy? We got to fight to get Donald Trump in the White House. Is there going to be an insurrection? Is there going to be a civil war? Is there going to be all of this kind of thing? But I think that people trying to affect the situation towards a second Donald Trump administration, which will begin to clean out the British Empire's tentacles inside the United States, have the wrong approach, or maybe not an adequate approach, should we say. Not the wrong approach, an adequate approach. And so that's why I want to discuss in this short video what I call the Biden option. Now, what is the Biden option? Okay. The Biden option, were Biden to become the president, even if temporarily, what he would be bringing in with him would be the final takeover of the institution of the presidency by the British Empire as it is collapsing, as the British imperial system is collapsing. Okay. And in the past, they did not really have full control of the institution of the presidency, which is a big institution. It's hundreds of people. It's a dialogue process. It involves many different factions. They came very close to taking over the institution of the president fully had you had a third term of Obama in the form of Hillary Clinton. In fact, they were waiting for Hillary Clinton to come in to begin to launch the wars, the decarbonization, the green genocide on a mass scale. And the intention of what was coming in with Hillary Clinton, which was really the third Obama administration, is population reduction on a massive scale. 6 billion people. They're planning to ultimately kill 6 billion people, taking the financial collapse, transforming it into a banker's dictatorship, promoting decarbonization, and then going with all these wars, and then doing regime changes in Russia and China and so forth and so on, everywhere in the world. This is where they were going. And whether they'd ended up in a nuclear war or whether it ended up being just depopulation without a nuclear war, that's where we were headed with the Hillary election. And that got disrupted. However, the administration that Donald Trump inherited was not his administration. None of it was his administration. His administration was pretty much a distillation and consolidation of a British takeover of the U.S. presidency. So in that situation, what can Donald Trump has been waging guerrilla warfare against his own government. And they've been waging massive warfare against him. But in the event of a Biden option becoming the government of the United States, that consolidation will be complete. And you will see a process unleashed that is going to kill 6 billion people, minimally. Okay? And that reality is not being brought to the American population. It's not being brought to the international stage. So there's a lot of games being played. The incoming Biden administration ain't going to tell the Chinese they plan to exterminate them, most of their population. They're not going to say that to the Russians. They're not going to say that to the Indians, but that's the intention. So this is where I think we need to make our focus. Our focus should be on that. The Biden option. The Biden option is the last hope for the final solution that the British failed to have in the way they wanted with Adolf Hitler. It is the final solution to the oligarchical organizing effort that goes back to the 1900s, to the 1800s, late 1800s. Okay, this is their last chance to implement the final solution. The issue of who Trump is or who not Trump and this and that, and, is he a bad guy? Is he going to go to nuclear war? Is he not? Or whatever, all of the noise around Donald Trump is going on, that's relatively insignificant to this question of the Biden question. Not who Biden is and is he a mental case? Is he not? Has he lost his whatever, marbles or whatever? That's not fundamental. That's not fundamental. It's what the intention is and what the consequences are of that Biden issue. And as we speak now, the Democratic Party leadership, Hillary and Bill and everybody, are basically telegraphing in advance that they will not accept the outcome of the election if Trump wins the popular vote and ultimately wins the electoral college vote. They will not accept that outcome. Okay? Now, that means they're going to take it into January 6th, which is when Congress convenes, the new Congress, the next session of Congress convenes, where a disputed election is resolved. It's not resolved. A disputed election is not resolved in the electoral college. It's resolved in the Congress according to the Constitution. All you need is one congressman to object, and you have a discussion on whether a vote on whether, and you could conceivably see a situation where Donald Trump could not get enough votes in the Congress, which is very much opposed to him, that he would not be granted the presidency. But then they have to vote. If they're not going to give him the presidency, they have to give somebody else the presidency. And it may not be Biden. It could be anybody. It could be Mickey Mouse, that's possible. It wouldn't be Mickey Mouse, but it could be anybody. It could be Joe Schmo, And if they fail to come up with an alternative to Trump, if Trump is not allowed to have that, then on January 20th, you have the end of Trump's first term. And if there's no president selected by the Congress, then you have this period where there's no president, where there's no selected president. You have a period between January 20th and thereafter. Now, as far as whether the Speaker of the House steps in temporarily as the president or not is not clear. But you enter this no man's land. Now, what the Democrats have been telegraphing is that in the event of that situation, which they are projecting, then the military has to step in and remove him. But who are they going to put in his place? None of that is discussed. So the chief of staff of the U.S. military, General Milley, has announced that the military has no part in the election process. It's to be determined by the Congress and the courts. The military is to have no say in it, which is actually constitutional. So this is what we're looking at. So what's the message that we're getting from this establishment, from this Democratic establishment? It's we're not going to accept a Trump presidency, and if not, and if push comes to shove, we'll trigger a civil war. We'd rather have a civil war in the United States than have a stable presidency under Donald Trump. That's the message that's coming out. It's very serious. It's a very serious situation. Now, so focusing on the Biden option and its consequences, I believe, is a good way to outflank all of the talking points of, in the election and everything else. It's a good way to this is what you're going to get. And you tell this to the international community. Stop playing footsies with Biden's people, with all these whores, these institutional whores, these foreign policy wanks, all these people that are just playing games. They're not dealing with the reality of what it means. They're not dealing with reality. The reality is a British consolidation of the institution of the presidency of the nation with the military might to wipe out humanity. You do not want that. Okay, you do not want that. So let's go back a little bit to when FDR's Bretton Woods system collapsed in 71, a new system was set up based on financial speculation. And that's when LaRouche emerged to announce that, Lyndon LaRouche emerged to announce that this system would ultimately collapse. And that's when the oligarchy also moved to prepare for their successor to that collapse, which is the green stuff. So that's when the population issue came up. That's when the environmentalist movement began to get underway. That's when the mass brainwashing from about the early 70s to now, which is roughly 50 years, of brainwashing on the green stuff. And now you have the Paris climate exchange. You have all of these people subscribing to this decarbonization and the climate emergency and all of this. You know, and reality is that this is not the case. You know, that we're in a climate emergency, and if we were, we would have no way of dealing with it, because it's not because of carbon dioxide. But nonetheless, they're pushing this whole thing, and Prince Charles said there's 18 months. We have 18 months to get this established. Well, he's talking 18 months from when he said that was the presidential election. So this is a full-scale imperial mobilization on a global scale to put the Biden option in. And I'm saying if we go after the Biden option properly, we hit the British on a vulnerable flank, which is their last option before they go under. And if they go under and they're not in control, then the potential for the United States to work with Russia, China, India in a new system is much greater. And that's the issue right now that we're dealing with. So you have two visions of the world. You have the vision of the world of this post-collapse green genocide, depopulation, feudalism. On the one hand, the vision of the oligarchy. And on the other hand, you have the LaRouche vision, which began to be put together in the 70s and 80s, of a all-out drive for development, infrastructure. In the 90s, you had the Belt and Road proposals, and you have the nuclear proposals, the Fusion Energy Foundation, the fusion proposals. That's the other vision. The other vision of a liberated humanity that's developing massive infrastructure and science and technology, going to establish a industrial base on the moon and the colonization of Mars, and a complete change in our orientation. These are the two visions which are in fundamental contention at this time. And that's what this is all about. That's what this is all about. This is what this Biden situation is all around. Now, as long as Trump is in the White House, a financial collapse of the global financial system would obviously lead to Trump nationalizing the Federal Reserve and directing the credit to keep people in their homes and keep the country going and so forth and so on, and infrastructure. You already see that tendency in Donald Trump, which is not being backed by the Congress. It's very important that Trump people get elected to Congress because that's where most likely the election is going to be decided. Okay? And so that's also a very important part of the equation. There's also telegraphing massive vote fraud in the mail-in thing. So there's a huge battle around that. Mail-in voting is probably not very good. It's probably tamperable. And the polls are saying that Trump is going to lose, but my sense is those polls are skewed in order to create the impression to justify the kind of a fraud that is expected. So a lot of this is complicated. You know, if the voters overwhelm the fraud apparatus, then you know, and so forth and so on. So it's that kind of situation. So why 6 billion people? Why do they want to get rid of 6 billion people? Because industrial development leads to more industrial development, leads to more scientific breakthroughs, leads to more skilled people, leads to a larger middle class that isn't going to do what they're told. If you can, but so about 1 to 2 billion people is where you can have some industrial capability under tight control over information, and a decent life for a small portion of the population, and the rest of the people are just garbage. You know, they're slaves. They're being used up, thrown out. And that's the other thing. Under Hitler's day, the idea that they had in these slave labor camps that they had in Hitler Germany is that these people could be used up. There's plenty of people. The world was overpopulated. We could use all these people up. And that's what this is all about, too. It's about using all these people, human sacrifice, you know, human trafficking and all of that, you know, and just having them work for just, you know, having mass death and mass concentration of free labor that's used up, just like in Nazi Germany, and in these work camps where they would, you know, they last 6 months, and then they had to gas them. They'd work them on a minimal calorie, and then they could bring in new people and use them up. You know, it's primitive. It's called primitive accumulation. That's the term that they use to call it. So that's the world that we're going to be going into with the Biden option. And if there's a massive resistance to that coming from China and Russia, then there will be most likely a nuclear war. So you have to understand that the presidential system and all of the bureaucracy, they hang on. A lot of it hangs on after a president comes in, and it takes a while to clean it out. And the House of Lords in 1978 wrote a report on this, saying that Trump could be contained in his first administration, but not in his second. Bolton backed that up in an interview with the Aspen Institute last month, where he said basically the same thing in his own way. That Trump has no allegiance to the globalists. He has no allegiance to the ideology of any ideology of geopolitics. Or he didn't say that, but that's what he meant. That he will do what he thinks is, you know, is his. It's his orientation. What's his orientation? Well, you know, when Obama sat with him and said he would probably have a war with North Korea, he asked Obama, "Oh, have you talked to Kim Jong-un?" And Obama said no. Well, why not? And that confounded the entire liberal establishment, because he's actually talking to this guy. That's not the way we're trying to run this thing. We got to keep that constant wars, constant stress, constant crisis in order to keep our system in control, in order to run the world's financial system as we know it. So Trump is an extreme threat to the globalized, to this globalized new world order, population reduction crowd. But how many people understand that that's the consequence of a Biden option? If you focus on that, then you might be able to convince some of the people that don't really realize what they're going to be getting into with the Biden option, either not to vote or don't vote for Biden. Don't vote for Biden. Perhaps vote for Trump, but don't vote for Biden. Okay? Yeah, that's the key. Don't vote for Biden. If you can't vote for Trump, don't vote for Biden. Right? So that's the key. So anyhow, I think I'm going to end it there. And I want to thank you for tuning in. And that's the Biden option. And that's what we don't want. We want to crush the Biden option.